Pyre is a very special game, but most of what makes it special is difficult to communicate succinctly. It's probably best described as a sports game crossed with a visual novel, but Pyre is much more than the sum of its parts. I'm not particularly a fan of either of those genres, but despite that, Pyre is now one of my favourite games of all time. To discuss why that is, let me start with some of its obvious strengths. Aesthetically, Pyre is breathtaking. The immaculate environments and backdrops are vividly evocative, and everywhere you look there are little animated touches adding life to the setting or selling a particular mood. It frequently looks like an exquisite painting come to life. Within the rights, the main action-focused parts of the game, it's clear that an immense amount of work has been spent making actions reflect characterization. Heavy characters move with weight and impact, sprightly characters have twitchy or idle animations, and all special moves read clearly at a glance. In the audio department, Pyre also maintains the high standard we've come to expect from Supergiant games. Darren Korb's folk-inspired soundtrack can't be done justice with a description. He has managed to depict the traits of characters and the stories behind locations with truly profound compositions. I think much of my immersion came from the soundtrack's consistency. It hints at a deep sense of culture and history within Pyre's world, especially when the music is being used diegetically. And while the game isn't completely voice acted, the expressive grunts, exclamations and phrases that characters utter go a long way towards depicting their unique personalities. And I haven't even mentioned the narrator of the rights, who is perfect.
I would tell you to turn back, cast down your hope, but all those such as you never listen.
Beneath these presentation features, Pyre's core mechanics are unique and polished. While, as I said, I'm not a huge fan of either sports games or visual novels, I do appreciate when games mix genres in a complementary way. For instance, in XCOM, squad-based strategy alternates satisfyingly with base building, as gameplay achievements in one mode assist your progress in the other. Similarly, in the Hand of Fate series, your approach to deck building and handling chance-based encounters will affect your success in combat sequences. In Pyre, the visual novel moments provide context and raise the stakes in the rights, while your success or failure within those matches spurs the story on in branching directions. Like every other aspect of this game, it's clear that much thought went into creating intuitive control systems and balanced gameplay. Mark Brown did a wonderful discussion of the ways that Pyre uses negative feedback to balance out successes and failures, which I really recommend watching. The link is in the video description. Perhaps my only issue with the action side of the gameplay is that because rights are typically over fairly quickly, I felt like I never really got to experience the full depth of the systems that have been implemented. Watching the nuance and complexity of professional Pyre players online makes it clear that in my playthrough I only scratched the surface. Now, if these achievements in aesthetics and mechanics were the entire extent of what made Pyre special, it would still be a very competently constructed game. But what makes it truly memorable is its story, writing, and themes. The dialogue in this game is, quite possibly without exception, the best writing I've encountered in an interactive medium. It avoids text dumps, but gives enough information to adequately express character traits and emotional states with subtlety and depth. The interaction between characters is, in turns, heartwarming, funny, tragic, and riveting, and even when characters at first appeared one-dimensional, I found myself becoming attached to them as more of their backstory was revealed. Pyre's story is relatively straightforward. It's basically about a group of friends trying to earn their pardon from lifelong societal banishment by competing in the rights, kind of like a fantasy version of The Running Man. But this story unfolds in an extremely organic way, as old feuds and deep histories are revealed, and as members of your group return to the rest of the world while you have to carry on without them. Supergiant Games has done a wonderful job making whatever way the story plays out for you feel definitive and consistent. Unlike other games with dynamic branching narratives, I always felt like my choices carried weight, and I didn't feel like there was an arbitrary intended sequence of events that I was at risk of spoiling. I ended my playthrough of Pyre with a deep love for all of its characters, and a thorough appreciation for having taken part in their journey. I want to conclude this video talking about some of the ways that Pyre isn't just a great experience, but how it demonstrates a lot of positive trends in game development and storytelling as a whole. I think a lot about the two-way relationship between games and society. I think about the attitudes that games represent, the behaviours they encourage, and the kind of role models and values they present as part of their world. I'm not saying that all games have to represent the real world accurately, or present values for us to emulate, but they do speak about the beliefs and values of their creators. I'd find it pretty problematic if, for instance, all women in games were depicted like they are in Duke Nukem, or every game about armed conflict featured exclusively Middle Eastern opponents, because that would reflect some pretty troubling attitudes held by developers. What then does Pyre have to say about the attitudes of its creators? What does it say about the kind of world that's worth pursuing, and how we should pursue it? The strongest characters in Pyre are the most empathetic. All of the gameplay is fundamentally non-violent, and the mythology of the rites makes it clear that violence is not the way to absolution. Literacy is treated as a laudable virtue, and one of the keys to taking control of one's own life. And characters in Pyre ruminate on themes of loyalty, corruption, justice, utopias, racism, religion, and mercy, and their insights are made more impactful because of the convincing nature of Pyre's writing. It might be a bit of a stretch to suggest that games like Pyre can make people more compassionate or thoughtful. But games do influence us. I think that's beyond debate. When I was 8 years old, I used to dress up like Ryu and try to Dragon Punch. Much later than that, I think my views on personal relationships were still being informed by games like Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights. I'm sure I'm not the only one who has been influenced in this way growing up with games. There are many games released today where violence is glorified, power is the most laudable trait, and the idea of imagining your enemies as complex and rational people simply never comes up. I'm fine with those games existing, I play a lot of them and I enjoy them. But it also makes me happy knowing that games like Pyre exist as counterexamples, where empathy is cool, reading makes you powerful, and every opponent you face has as complex a story as you do. I think of a generation of players raised on games like Pyre, and it makes me hopeful for the future. Thanks for watching. If this is your first time to my channel, please consider subscribing to see more of these discussions in the future. I also make a whole bunch of covers of video game music, so if that's your thing, you can check that out with the cards on screen now. Take care of yourself, and I'll catch you soon.